Joe Thomas had, one of the most beautiful trumpet sounds. A lot of people don't remember, he was lead trumpeter in Fletcher Henderson's band when the other two were Roy Eldridge and Dick Vance, both of whom got solos. Of course, Roy got the most, but Joe didn't get any. And he was relatively late in being recognized and sufficiently recorded, but then he had a spell there where he was on records a lot. Harry Lim really liked him. He's on Keynote, and beautiful session under his own name, and with Don Byas, and with so many people. And like I said, Joe was an outstanding lyrical trumpeter, and he just shone when he had a great melodic sense. But he was a complicated person. And have you ever, you must have interviewed Phil Sharp, you must have done stuff with Phil. Well, Phil can tell you a Joe Thomas story about the place where Phil was running sessions up near Columbia. Forget the name of it.
The West End Cafe.
Yeah, the West End. But I can remember an incident that shows, something about Joe's personality. There was a session that was actually organized by a Japanese visitor to the U.S. who turned out to be a doctor, I think, and it was medical school or whatever. Vic was on it, Vic Dickinson, and Rudy Powell, and Joe. I forget who was the rhythm section. It was outdoors, and it was on a Sunday afternoon. And Ira Gittler was there, and Ira was an aspiring but not very good alto saxophonist, and he had brought his alto. He very rarely did this, but we drove together. I forget who had a relatively large car where there was room for Joe and Ira and me and whoever was driving. And we had a nice conversation on the way from Manhattan, and it was the longest drive. And then came the music, which turned out well. And Ira, who is a dear friend, so I don't want to, really say too much about his alto playing, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad, but it didn't do any harm, I mean, he didn't do that much of it. On the way back, Joe gave Ira a lecture, which was really not very nice. I mean, he could have found a nice way of saying what he said, but he said, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't play this instrument in public, and not with, professional musicians. And poor Ira, was crestfallen, and he could have said that in a nice way. But so Joe was not the most popular guy among his peers. He played so beautifully, but he was could be a difficult person to deal with. And I think that had something to do with holding him back a bit in terms of getting full recognition. But when you talk about there's that wonderful session on Keynote that has Joe and Earl Hines and Trummy Young and God. And there's so many things. I mean, Joe, and I heard him live many times. His sound when you heard him live was just gorgeous. So it's one of those things where a personality and the musical expression are not necessarily the same.